Welcome once more, the viewers of Riga Security Forum. This is part 2 of the final episode of Riga Security Forum podcast. And we are going to discuss today questions related to NATO and Latvia security. And I am honored to announce that Artis Pabriks, Minister of Defense today, is joining us. I hope you hear us well. Yes, I do. And thank you for joining in such a challenging and busy time. In the first part, we discussed NATO and transatlantic threats and issues, but with you, I would like to touch upon the points of the security and the defense of Latvia. Specifically, so the first question for me would be, in how safe region do we live currently? How secure is our world? Of course, given the events on the Belarus border, on Poland-Belarus border, Lithuania-Belarus, Latvia-Belarus as well. And also as we hear that there are increasing military efforts and concentration between Russia and Ukraine, on the border of Russia and Ukraine. Well, I would say that Latvian citizens can feel relatively safe, and on the national level we have made all efforts in order for our citizens to feel safe. We are also NATO member state, EU member state, and Nordic countries as such are one of the most secure regions in the world. This is all from the positive aspect. The risks, though, are that our neighbor is one of the countries, of the states in the world which wants to change the order, the current order, the existing order, and this maybe was not true 10 years ago, but when we began, when Georgia conflict, armed conflict began, especially also after Ukraine armed conflict began, we cannot feel as safe as previously. And from the military perspective, I think that, and also not only from military perspective, I guess we have lost Belarus, one independent state, because now I think we can perceive Belarus as a Russian-controlled territory, which is an additional threat to the continent of Europe. And also we are hearing news from the border of Russia and Ukraine, where the presence of armed forces of military is as big as never before. And of course, if it is true, it is true. We cannot exclude any kind of provocation. So, on the diplomatical plane, in international negotiations, I think we need to express concerns additionally. And also potentially the Article number 4 enactment was discussed for improvement of the security situation, as the security situation is becoming more threatening currently. And this is the question about these threats and risks. Can we now also expect some other measures to be taken in the Baltic region in the nearest future? Well, Article 4, one of the meanings of it is when we invite our allies to discuss the possibility of enactment of the Article 4, we have to have a plan. What do we want to receive from our allies? And for Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, which could initiate such discussion. We have a plan like that. But we have also agreed that if the situation worsens, then we are inviting the allies to this discussion, but also we agreed that until then and currently the situation with security does not call for it currently. And regarding all our allies, I'm speaking about both NATO and also outside. NATO, mainly EU, of course. The awareness of the situation is the best also with Nordic countries, including Finland and Sweden, which are not NATO member states. And we know very well the challenges, like Great Britain, Norway, Denmark, they also know very well these challenges. But the countries farther away, I think they are not maybe that aware of such threats and situation. And I must refer here our meeting with the ministers of EU, and there was no state which would not begin their speech with expressing solidarity with Latvia, Lithuania. We have spent enough energy in order to also communicate this common message. I believe, or I hope that we would never trigger Article number 4, but I believe that our activities has also been comprehensive. Regarding the solidarity and awareness, after 2014, when in Wales and Warsaw, country leaders also decided regarding assisting measures to support security, then also it was said that Baltic states is the finished business, so to say, that we have done everything possible in order to deter the possibility of some threat. However, we also see that maybe also not in terms of infantry, but also in the sea and in the air, there are also threats where NATO involvement, additional involvement, is also necessary. Well, that is actually, if we say that you have offered this assistance to Baltic states and Poland, that this is a finished business, it's rather bold statement. As we know, there's a saying that Riga is never ready. Security questions and issues are also never resolved. And our opponents, especially those in Russia, who try to dare and also who try to challenge the status quo, they work with their own readiness and military capability improvement and strengthening their forces. I think that in comparison to the times before 7 and 8 years ago, this has all changed. And currently, one of the priorities, I think the air and navy protection is our priority, not only ground forces, so we need medium radius rockets and Patriot systems, we need the drone systems similar to Turkish production or American production, and we need to cover also the whole territory of Latvia from everywhere, and also the protection from the sea, because potentially the threat comes, and also the military maneuvers or trainings are ongoing also in the sea, and we need to such situations, or we would have to be able to counteract? Well, the plans regarding this are also ready. Currently, with the Allies, we are discussing also where we could gain such support, obtain such support, whether it would be our procurement. Well, the question was regarding the equipment necessary, which I mentioned previously, and also we were discussing regarding the location where it must be located, this airborne security defense systems. But everything is fine with planning. We need to understand that also the budget is a problem, and in the long term we need funding, which is a lot, and also training, and also the procurement process takes time. So I believe that the most correct way would be, as the situation does not improve, well, we would need maybe more presence of allies, and while this is all progressing and changing, we should maybe procure additional equipment. Regarding the presence of allies, Latvia is also one of the states where there are, well, maybe most nations are represented, and it also poses different challenges. So how much do you think it is integrated with national armed forces, and how these forces of allies, how can they be involved in some, for example, hybrid warfare or conflict situation, as currently there is a conflict between Poland and Lithuania on the border of Poland and Belarus, sorry. So I think that NATO forces currently located in Latvia are, I guess they are integrated in the best way, as much as I know, compared to other Baltic states, because as I am informed, this integration is full, and what it means? It means that in case of any crisis or conflict, we can perceive these forces as coordinated. We can also perceive them as our own national armed forces. And here, I must say, many thanks to Canada, because Canada is that main nation with which we have cooperation. Also others have contributed, and our awareness on the political level with represented nations and everything else, in case we get to the point of some critical situation, we need to use a common language, and every activity must be smooth, and we need to understand each other without some political interferences. Regarding the hybrid attacks, currently I believe that we do not need to involve our allies. I think they can continue their training as previously. Currently it seems that the border guard and national armed forces actually succeed in their daily activity regarding defense. You also said that removing forces from Central Europe, from Germany, from Latvian politicians, we heard also, including you, you said that we are ready to welcome armed forces from the United States of America. And in such context, the new administration of the United States of America, do you feel some kind of indications, and what is the cooperation with them and with the new administration? What do you feel, how the cooperation changes? I think we see the continuity, we see raised awareness, we see that the cooperation strengthens, continues to strengthen with the United States of America. From our part, nothing has changed. Our long-term goal is to achieve more presence of armed forces of the United States of America. regardless of where they are currently or where they could be. I think we can and we need them. We need them permanently located here. And what about the execution of such a plan or desire? Will we see it in the future? Well, I think this is an ongoing process of diplomacy here, and this is what we're talking about. And also regarding Latvian ambition, are we interested in increasing the force also located here? EFE group currently is rather complete. I would say that the ground forces are sufficient. As I said, I would believe that we would rather need some more drones and airborne equipment. Of course, if some other help or assistance will be offered to us, we're going to accept it. But as I said, that this cooperation is rather stable. We also touched upon challenges of our neighbors, or them creating challenges and obstacles and threats. What do you believe, as you being also this, as developing and improving the safety here? What about Latvia and the alliance? What does it mean to us? I see there are two scenarios which can pose bigger threat further to European states. It is the fragmentation between the European states, and our opponent is working very hard in this direction. They are trying to divide us. This is one of the challenges which actually makes us weaker, which is not good. We are the bordering state. Any state and any continent becoming weaker, their borders are then threatened more. But from the inside of Russia, there also comes another threat. International ambition of Russia is nothing new, and we cannot exclude that in Russia there are some sources of instability, as there also historically have been at different times, whether through revolutions and other crises. I think that if there are some problems internally, I guess that our goal is to actually those shocks inside Russia, so that they are not heard and their influence is not felt here in Latvia, as it could, of course, happen. I think they should manage with their problems themselves, and they shouldn't also, in case of any problems, well, so to say, rely on their neighbors to absorb some of the disturbance. And now our cooperation partners, the USA, or maybe now even strategically China, maybe this also will be used to destabilize the situation in various regions, also in the Baltic states, but maybe also in Finland, who knows? Well, what is the cornerstone of our what is the how we can deter Russia from any further activities against us? Well, I think that first of all, I think, and we have seen the strategic communication efforts and umbrellas have been tried to use against us. Like they said, for example, it doesn't matter how much you invest in security, if anything happens, you cannot do anything anyways. But it is not true. because in case of regional conflict, in case of any conflict, we are indeed smaller state than Russia, but at the same time we need to understand some historic context between Russia and Finland, the wars, historic wars, that it's not always that the bigger force is the one to succeed, or we need to look at the readiness of our community in such situations. This is a very important element of prevention and deterrence. I think that if we invest and if we are ready to get involved in conflict, I think the opponent would need to think several times in order to, before they make some decision regarding the action. And also during some currently, as for example, if Russia understands that any well, so to say, there are activities they could do that could, for example, trigger World War III. If they know it, well, I don't think they think that this is worth it. So once again, the deterrence element from the part of the alliance has to be kept very alive during all times, and we need to receive the support and give also the response, provide response to any activities as just Latvia, and also with our partners. The desirability and, as you said, readiness to protect our state as means of deterrence in such context from the community and also on the level of individuals, we have had surveys. What do you believe, like, how much do our citizens are willing and ready to protect their own state if the situation requires so? I think sociologically we have performed indeed the survey, and in case of such day X, we are willing to protect our values, our families, our society. I think it is constantly high level, and I think that in Latvia there are more patriots than somebody thinks there are, because in 2014 the people got involved in National Guard, and well, this is again an ongoing work of explaining to the citizens, also implementing comprehensive security measures and systems. There is a saying, if you don't want to feed your own army, you will have to feed somebody else's army. So this is true. And we are probably the last nation to want something like that. I am optimistic that our society is ready to step up for their interests and values. And one other challenge in the NATO context, Secretary General also expressed the concern and accentuated this, People's Republic of China. From the perspective of security, of defense, how do we view them and challenges they present? So, and also the second part of the question is whether it is true that shifting this focus, whether it is true that the focus might shift from the threats from Russia to China, actually. Yes, indeed. We are concerned with the position of China in the world. We see that their ambitions increase, and their economic and military power also grows and develops, and here, being neighboring country with Russia, I think we simply have no other choice. We are Europeans. Europeans and the United States are in an alliance, so historically, culturally, and geographically, it is already what is given in this situation. It is not a question. We know in Europe, of course, there are some politicians and somebody expressing the views that there is going to be a conflict between the United States and China, then Europe could be neutral in this case. I think it's definitely not true. We belong to one history, to one culture. We do not want, we want to cooperate with the United States of America as a continent, as a part of the world. And if indeed we are discussing military challenges internationally, I think Europe has no choice. It should be together with the United States. And here we see also one other thing, that China, from the perspective of their interests, Russia expresses a lot of desire to be a little brother of China. Well, Russia is smaller, so they cannot be their big brother. But in case the situation in the Pacific Ocean or in relationship between the United States, Europe and China, if it worsens, I think Russia, well, we cannot exclude that Russia uses this. When war in Iraq began, we have seen the repressions against the people of Baltic states when Baltic states were occupied, when also, well, there are historic references to such events, and it had become, well, they have made actions in some significant dates. So it is cynical, and we have seen from them these activities, and it can also mean that there might be situations in the future that this is a challenge we must face. This is the China challenge in the Pacific Ocean, and also our neighbor Russia here in Europe. And what about NATO? How capable is it looking in these two directions? NATO is the strongest alliance. In order for us to be successful in prevention of any conflicts, for us to be more successful in it, Europe needs to pay more attention to this problem and question, because we see that 78% of the power of NATO is still the United States of America, and I think that all NATO member states, we need to invest more in defense, in being part of NATO. There is nothing else we need or want. European Union has a completely different goal. They face other, again, problems and challenges, strategic communication, cyber threats and other things. Moving on, we need to strengthen also our technical and military cooperation between European nations which are not NATO member states, Finland and Sweden, for example. And as a member state, we need to strengthen also our cooperation with states with common values in the Pacific Ocean region, South Korea, Australia, Philippines and other, which I didn't name them all, but these are the states which have similar interests, looking further into the future. Europe's strategic autonomy you mentioned. In one question I wanted also to ask to you, how do we see Europe's strategic independence developing? Because the forces we see here, for example, France and their president especially, they are, well, putting it on agenda, continue doing so. And what is the position of Latvia? How do we see the distribution between NATO and European Union? Well, the Baltic states are not supporters of this concept. I have also expressed this, and the concept is not clear. People understand it differently, experts understand it differently. Well, there's a confusion. I think that we don't need to talk about how are we and who are we here in Europe, but we simply need to continue working. Especially after Brexit, our military capabilities in EU, in between the member states, we see they are not sufficient. Well, maybe we would like them to be better. So we see the position change in Germany, Germany being the largest EU country, the biggest industrial potential and capacity, but the society of Germany is not mentally ready for them developing their military capability and involvement in some military conflict, because after Second World War, this is basically a consequence of the end of Second World War. But currently, I don't think that, well, I think that it must change. The elections in Germany, we've seen, and we have seen them expressing their attitude towards arming and the developing of military industry. I think they still there dominate some pacifistic, well, thoughts and ideas that, well, and we know that during such times, actually, and for them to be able to express their views, actually somebody else needs to take care of security. So contribution of Germany in this hard security, I think it is well below their real capabilities and what the Allies are expecting from them. But Germany is not the only state like that. We need to express the political will to see that we have this threat, to identify it, not just wait for like the water level already being higher and we are in problems and we need to save ourselves. Authoritarian regimes, they know very clearly what they want. They want to change the given system, and I don't know how we can convince someone. On the 30th of November, ministers of foreign affairs of NATO are going to meet, and for development of the concept for NATO for 10 and 15, next 10 and 15 years. Well, what do you believe? What are the key points that they need, and we need, NATO needs, for development in the future 10 and 15 years? All member states must meet the real situation, and I wouldn't say this is strategic autonomy in Europe. This is a political concept. We have to seriously invest in cyber security. We need to be ready with all our military plans in all possible regions, 360-degree security, and we also need to be politically ready to use force when necessary. And also very important is to build the bridge between Europe, North America, and also other allies everywhere in the world in the Pacific Ocean region. We need to seriously strengthen this. I think this is a very clear message also from your part, and thank you very much for the conversation. What I heard from it, what key takeaway would be, is that security issues in the context of also global development, the security has major significance in how Europe is developing, and also transatlantic relationships, and the presence of the United States of America is very important for our development. And thank you very much, and I welcome you to join also conference of Ministers of Foreign Affairs. If you connect to Latvia Institute of International Affairs, you will be able to observe it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Minister.